Have you ever heard of reactive attachment disorder? It's a condition that is found in children who were neglected in early childhood before the age of 5 and never formed a healthy bond with their mother or primary caregiver. Why am I talking about this on this channel? Well, I'm talking about this because children with reactive attachment disorder very often grow up to become adults on the cluster B spectrum. They're narcissists, psychopaths, or sociopaths. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today at queenbeing.com, reactive attachment disorder and the implications for adults. So let's get started.
Closed captioning provided by Athena Moberg and CPTSDFoundation.org.
My name's Angie Atkinson, and on this channel I offer free daily video coaching to help you discover, understand, and overcome narcissistic abuse in toxic relationships. I like to call it toxic relationship rehab. So if that sounds good to you, hit that subscribe button and let's get going. So when we're talking about reactive attachment disorder, what we mean by the word attachment is what happens when a child is given the comfort and soothing and normal care that parents give children. So for example, when my babies would cry, I would pick them up and I would bounce them and I would feed them and change their diaper and do whatever was necessary. Well, in the case of a child with reactive attachment disorder, very often they stop crying because nobody responds to their cries. And the whole reason a baby cries is to get their needs met. So kids with reactive attachment disorder haven't been loved in a normal way. They haven't been picked up when they cried. Their diapers weren't changed. They weren't fed on time, things like that. So they aren't able to form that healthy emotional attachment to their mother or other caregiver. The attachment is formed when the caregiver consistently meets the child's needs. In most cases, parents do meet the child's needs, at least on some level. And it's because of that attachment that kids actually learn to trust people in general, as well as to develop empathy and to care about other people's needs and feelings. The attachment also helps them to regulate their own emotions, to develop relatively healthy relationships in most cases, in some cases, and a positive self-image. But of course, the absence of emotional warmth, the absence of having their physical needs met, all of these things in the first 5 years of their life, in fact, really the first 18 months of their life is probably the most important, but the absence of that can negatively affect their entire future. So we're going to talk about the symptoms of reactive attachment disorder in children. They can affect a child's life, like I said, from every single aspect. There are two different types of reactive attachment disorder, and they will be called inhibited and disinhibited, or they will be called avoidant or anxious avoidant. So just in a nutshell, the common symptoms of inhibited reactive attachment disorder will include being unresponsive or even resistant to being comforted by people outside of themselves, or seeming really detached and won't look a person in the eyes, abnormally detached, or being very inhibited, so much so they don't even show any emotion at all if they even experience emotions. And then they'll be very withdrawn and they will either get overly friendly or completely avoid other people. Now, if we're talking about disinhibited reactive attachment disorder, it looks a little different. They will talk to anyone without any fear. And these are little children. They will become inappropriately familiar with people on a very fast-paced basis. And in some cases, they may become very picky about who they'll talk to. So it's kind of a two-sided thing. I'll tell you a really quick story. I met a little girl at the pool. We have a little community pool here, and there's a foster family here in our neighborhood who takes care of children who have been abused and neglected. And this little girl really just quickly attached to me. I was there with my daughter, and I was there to be with my daughter. My daughter very quickly, this was about 2 or 3 years ago. My daughter was young. She was 8 or 9, and she instantly recognized something was off about this girl and just went away from her, moved away. And the girl would not stop following me around the pool. She was like, oh, let's go have some girl time. Oh, let's do this. Oh, let me tell you my whole life story, etc. And at the time, I was really weirded out by this because I was really there to spend time with my child, but this girl would not let go, and she was a few years older than my daughter, and I felt very uncomfortable with the whole situation. And in hindsight, I think maybe that girl had reactive attachment disorder because she was so overly friendly and so overly familiar, like instantly acted like she knew me and that she'd known me for her whole life. It was a really sad situation. I was nice to her, of course, but it was awkward in the moment because I was really there to spend time with my own child. So that's an example, I think, of someone who may have had reactive attachment disorder. How many people are actually affected by reactive attachment disorder? It's really difficult to know exactly how many children may have been affected by reactive attachment disorder because of the fact that most families don't ever get help for this kind of problem. They just assume that something else is going on. So we don't know any real statistics on that. So how do the symptoms manifest in adults? Well, the symptoms are a little bit different with adults than they are with children, but unfortunately, the symptoms really negatively affect every relationship the person gets into as an adult. The way that the avoidant type of reactive attachment disorder affects adults is very much like narcissists. They have the grandiose personality. They have big fantasies, big ideas, big dreams about things that are unrealistic. They also feel like they're special, different, unique, better than everyone in some cases, very much like narcissists. They may become a workaholic in order to avoid relationships. And they tend to see relationships as just really a big problem, not really worth the effort, something they don't want to deal with in many cases. And again, this is the avoidant type. They often would prefer to work by themselves than with other people. Like narcissists, they tend to be shallow or vain, and they tend to be really entitled, very arrogant, and sometimes have really obvious feelings of they're more important than other people around them. They see people as generally untrustworthy, unreliable, not worth their time. They, like narcissists, lack empathy and remorse. They have a real problem with authority, and they hate following rules, and in fact very often think they're above the rules. They're overcritical of other people and sometimes themselves. They're very hostile. Their energy just kind of almost hurts you when they're in the same room. And they very often display just explosive anger for no apparent reason, or excessive anger about something. Something that might annoy someone without RAD might actually cause a huge rage in someone who has RAD. RAD stands for RAD, Reactive Attachment Disorder. Then when we're talking about anxious or ambivalent reactive attachment disorder in adults, we're talking about someone who is extremely emotional, like the highest of the highs, the lowest of the lows. They don't seem to understand why they should help other people. It doesn't make any sense to them. And in fact, they see people in general as difficult to understand. They're very, very triggered by the idea of rejection. They can't stand it. They have a huge fear of abandonment and very often act and feel very jealous about many things, not just in romantic relationships, but they're easily affected by jealousy. They see relationships as a one-sided deal, not balanced. And at the same time, they get most of their feeling of security by being in relationships, so they may actually jump into them quickly. This is, of course, in contrast to avoidant reactive attachment disorder. They are very possessive with anyone they're in a relationship with, whether we're talking about a friend, a partner, a parent, it doesn't matter. They feel very possessive of that person. This is the type of person who also tends to very quickly declare their love for another person, very quickly jump into a relationship, like I said, almost lives for the relationship. They become totally focused on it, preoccupied by it. They consistently make unrealistic demands of the people that they're in relationships with. They idealize people, in the beginning at least, and sometimes long-term depending on the person. They tend to have a lot of short-term relationships as opposed to one long-term one, or when we're talking about friendships and even romantic relationships, they're very short-term because for a short period of time, they really play off as someone who's amazing. But then the minute that something doesn't go their way, or the minute they feel jealous or anxious or overly emotional, sometimes it's too much for the other person and the relationship is cut off. They feel like they are underappreciated or unappreciated, and they have this tendency to just really give too much in some ways of themselves, but like compulsively try to help some people, which is of course in direct contrast to the avoidant reactive attachment disorder. With that being said, the compulsive caregiving behavior can feel overwhelming for some people, but it's also kind of what sucks some people right in. And if you think about, for example, someone who shows up with anxious or ambivalent reactive attachment disorder, it could also be a histrionic narcissist. They might show themselves in that way. Both of these types of reactive attachment disorder in adults might also present with being prone to deep depression, excessive risk-taking, self-harming behavior, impulsivity, risk-taking, socially inappropriate behavior. And interestingly enough, a lot of people affected by RAD do not remember a lot of their childhood. They have blocked out a lot of their childhood memories. And some people report seeing a certain darkness behind their eyes when they are upset or angry. They almost kind of go blank. And sadly, an adult with reactive attachment disorder is actually at risk for abusing their own children as well. Of course, these behaviors could occur in people who don't have reactive attachment disorder, and we must recognize that. But if these symptoms are going on and on and on, this person might need to get some professional help. Oftentimes, these people are labeled as criminals or even mentally disturbed, when in reality, they're just reacting to something that happened to them in childhood. But in general, these people don't have good relationships when they're affected this way. They can't even fully experience them like someone who isn't affected this way. They struggle to have any sense of self at all, especially not a positive one, and their mental health in general suffers. It is a trauma disorder. Even though the DSM says that it must be diagnosed before the age of 5, people with reactive attachment disorder in adulthood are very deeply affected. They have dysfunction in their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, their behaviors, and very often this can be directly connected to psychopathy. In fact, most doctors will tell you that the biggest risk is how they deal with other people in relationships. That first attachment to the mother is incredibly important, or the primary caregiver, when it comes to their future relationships. Having a caregiver, a mother or father who loves them and takes care of them and protects them and comforts them helps people grow up and become healthy, normal adults. Even parents who abuse us later in life very often take care of our needs as infants. But without forming that bond, very often you don't ever have normal relationships. Reactive attachment disorder also puts you at risk for various anxiety disorders and, like I said, depression, dissociative disorders, and of course, personality disorders. They struggle to show affection appropriately. They resist giving or receiving love, even though they crave it. They have control issues, anger issues. They don't really get emotions that well. They don't understand them. They feel lonely and empty a lot, and they really don't feel like they belong anywhere. So can reactive attachment disorder be healed? Very much like narcissists in general, it's possible, but in most cases it isn't healed because the person doesn't recognize the real problem. This is especially true with someone who hasn't been diagnosed. What it would require is the same thing it would require with any narcissist, and that is to seek out, find, acknowledge, and heal the core wound. They do say, though, that it's absolutely crucial that this is treated, and depending on the age of the person and the goals of the person and the severity of their situation, they usually need to deal with the issues that brought them to this point in the first place. So if they have any medical issues that happen because of the neglect, they need to deal with those. They have to be able to establish a nurturing, safe feeling environment. They need to find a way to build some sort of attachment to a caregiver type person, and they have to work really hard to develop a sense of emotional security. They often need help with their social skills, and treatment would involve giving them certain opportunities to have normal social experiences. Those are the kinds of treatments that typically are attempted in childhood. I do know one person who has this disorder personally, and from what I understand from his adoptive parent, this won't ever be fully resolved according to their doctors. But he's developing social skills and learning new ways to deal with people. And I think in his case he might be okay because he has a mother who loves him and tries to help him. And she's doing what she needs to do to try to get him treatment and help. But even though she loves him as deeply as she does, he has been a very difficult child for her, and she's really struggled with him on many levels. At this point, he's a teenager and he's a good kid, but he's learning how to function in a way that most of us don't have to, because he doesn't naturally know how to deal with people, because he doesn't fully understand emotions and how other people relate to him. After somebody's over the age of 5, there's a lot of other stuff that has to be done. Therapists and doctors will approach it differently with every person. This is not something a coach can treat. With adults who are experiencing this and going through this, doctors will often use cognitive behavioral therapy as treatment, or reality therapy, and in some cases play therapy, because it allows them to express themselves. Play therapy obviously is also used with children, but the very disorder itself makes it so difficult to connect with and trust another person, which includes, of course, their care team, and that makes it even harder for someone to actually get successful treatment for reactive attachment disorder. It's hard for them to develop any sort of bond with a person. They really struggle with having a natural rapport with anyone. So treatment is very, very difficult. And like I said, while some people say that it is possible, it is never easy, and anyone dealing with this disorder is struggling in ways that we can't always understand. Now, does this give them any excuse to abuse you psychologically or otherwise? No, it does not. So please do not take this video as me saying, well, your narcissist might not have been loved enough as a child, so it's okay for you to stay with them and let them abuse you. No, that's not the case. But this could explain why someone who seemed to be one thing and then turned out to be a whole other thing is the way they are. What do you think? This brings me to the question of the day. And the question of the day is, do you think you've dealt with someone with reactive attachment disorder, and what was your experience like with them? Share your thoughts, share your ideas, share your experiences in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Now, before I go, I want to give a quick shout out to every single one of my subscribers, everyone who comments on my videos, shares my videos, likes my videos. Thank you so much. You are helping me to reach more people, to help them to discover, understand, and overcome narcissistic abuse in toxic relationships, and that means the world to me. So thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart. And while I'm here, I want to offer a quick shout out to my amazing channel members, those people who support me through the YouTube channel membership program. Their contributions help me to continue to offer free resources for survivors of narcissistic abuse through this YouTube channel, through queenbeing.com, and through many other sources. So again, thank you so much, Inner Circle. My Inner Circle includes Jessica, Lori, Jonathan, Abraham, Shannon, Kristen, Jill, OG Marv, Beautiful Purpose, Dawn Elizabeth, Roseanne, Shauna, Michael John, Julie, Mental Hilarity, Lou, Missy, Deborah, Denise, Stephanie, Tiffany, Nessa, Marcia, Stacy, Boku, Trisha, Kimberly, Thoy, Victoria, Patty, Carrie Ann, Ashley, Chantel, La Precious, Steph, Dana, Mo Cowboy, Shay, Christina, Ray Ray, Christy, Alda, Smith and Wesson, Ms. Lisa, Martha, Freedom Lee, Mindy, Lynn, Linnell, Phoenix, Cherie, Alice, Carrie, Angel, Bible News Radio, Linda, Charlie, Laura, Pierre Lala, Janet, Paul, Sarah Lee, Marlene, James, Life's Revival, Lorenzo, Deborah, Roxanne, and my very first supporter, Angela Falsetta. Again, I just want to say to my inner circle, thank you so much for hitting that join button. It really does mean a lot to me to know that you're supporting me. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart. As always, thank you so much for being a part of my day and a part of my life, and hey, thanks for letting me be a part of yours. It really does mean a lot to me. All right, now that's all I've got for you. But before I go, take a look at the videos I'm leaving for you right there and right there. And while you're here, hit that subscribe button so we can stay connected and continue on this healing journey together. I'll see you soon.